Hi. My name is Guatemala, to the brain. Today I saw the news. It is pleasant or not, this said that Guatemala and Belize decide that they will solve the dispute of 140 years that we had with that country in the hair. To begin, I will analyze what is I point at happening. Because this case will put on approval to the world justice, if as that this exists. To begin, they should know that the court of the Hague, this compound one for representatives of the world powers England in Bill. This court looked after the interests of the Englishmen. It is next the injustice that seems to be approaching on Guatemala. It is necessary to be prepared so that once but the whole world looks our face of stupid, because I don't believe that Guatemala wins bigger thing in the aforementioned court. That but the justice veils for the political interests of the empire, but they see its resolutions in the marine disputes of Nicaragua and Colombia. Analyze then. To speak of Belize is very important because this is reason of opposing feelings among Guatemalan. At the same time, it is topic of a lot of shame and frustration that already had to support for a lot of time. I left it to the street to ask decent people about the opinion that deserved them the case, and most responded this way: Belize is our endpoint. Others with mediocre mentality and defeatists said it no longer interests me, that it's already got lost. The court will fail in favor of Belize to be spoiled of England. To know me, one doesn't swim of that. To my the school cell didn't do the map of Guatemala with Belize, and that utterly leave now mutilated. Among several opinions, but these answers are those book communes. Good, I decided to make a documentary to illuminate the mind of so much persons that ignores the true history of the because so much problem. This history dates since Guatemala was colony. Belize it leaves of its territory. There many English pirates that were devoted to cut stick of Campeche arrived. Spain feared that they will usurp most territory, legalized its permanency. In 1783 and 86, Spain signed with England 2 exclusive agreements for court and usufruct of the tin stick. The first agreement, signed in 1783 between Spain and England, established that the granted area was among the rivers Belize, or Belize, and the Deep River. These earth areas added a total of 6,000 square kilometers, the whole north part of the current Belize, demarcating their limits clearly. Just as I give them to know in this map their dates of the time. Of the total extension of Belize, that is of 23,000 square kilometers, they were 12,700 square kilometers on those which never, before or later, Spain or Guatemala granted any right to the English thieves. With the independence of Guatemala in 1821, such an usufruct expired legally, and that whole geographical area passed to be part of Guatemala. From this moment, any permanency constituted an undue occupation illegally. This you confirmed in the Treaty of Recognition of Peace and Friendship between Spain and Guatemala in 1863, where the king settles down that Spain gives up forever for yes and its successors, to all form of sovereignty, rights and stocks that they corresponded him on the territory of Guatemala, recognizing it as free nation, sovereign and independent, with its counties and other territories that belong him, or that from now on they will belong him. This ratified the cancellation of usufruct right to taking our England and our territory. Then, did England base its right on Belize on what? Because it based it on the Treaty Clayton Bulwer 1,850 inches, the one which the Englishmen and the foreigners committed to not having, to use, to occupy, neither to exercise domain on it, leaves some of Central America. But to make matters worse of wrongs for Guatemala, to exception the permanency of England in British Honduras was known Belize in the time. This treaty is important for 3 reasons. First, because it has been an instrument in which the Englishmen demonstrated to have occupied the territory of Belize rightfully. Pertinent, they made the same thing with the Falkland in Argentina. Second, they started the plans to found an autonomous colony for the Englishmen for not losing their influence in the region. Third, Guatemala alleges that this agreement was violated as for the territorial expansion that sought England. As much the American as the Englishmen were not to pleasure with the Clayton Bulwer, for what they decided to continue trading to reach beautiful agreement for them, they please stand out with them, because the interests of Guatemala and Belize people, then they didn't care it. They also negotiated the presence in the coast Mosquito in Nicaragua, the islands of the Bay of Honduras and the case of Belize. The question is that in 1856 they united again, and they celebrated the Treaty of Dallas-Clarendon. In this treaty they were solved the problems in the coasts of Nicaragua and the Honduran islands, but in the case of Belize the thing was very bad for Guatemala. They stepped us because they said that in the coast of the Bay of Honduras, that is adjacent to the north with the Mexican county of Yucatan, and to the south for the river Sarsen, it has not been taken into account by the attributed parts to this treaty, and that the limits of Belize to the Occident should be agreed by means of a treaty between England and Guatemala, because when being ratified this treaty the frontiers they won't be able to be later extended. What they have to observe here is ask the Englishmen they settled down as limit the river Sarsen when in the time Belize didn't arrive but there of the river Sitten, that is to say in an immediate way the size of Belize was more than duplicate. They were stolen this way almost in our entirety except to the Atlantic one, the damned ones. But you think? And Guatemala? Where is the government from Guatemala? That the Americans are believed to negotiate in that way so dirty our territory. On account of what, and they made it the damned bastards with what right? Because so that they know with that for these treaties Guatemala was not consulted. Don't grant any authorization. The only treaty that Guatemala subscribed with the United Kingdom was that of Asen and Awike in 1859, which was almost that forced by the growing invasion that the English idiots were making in the Petun. In this he sought to notice these limits, conditioning for their validity the construction of a highway between the capital of Guatemala and Belize, in certain term. Which the English thieves never built it, and the treaty logically expired. Guatemala alleges that said it was never a treaty of opposite, neither territorial but of trade, while England and now Belize alleges the opposite, and that in this treaty it is recognized as frontier the River Salston. This was the territory of Guatemala in the year that this treaty was signed. But do they know who the damned president that signed this cursed treaty for the nation was? He's Rafael Carrera, which is one of the characters but disastrous that has had the history of Guatemala, to make matters worse than to tolerate for but 30 years to the unfortunate that didn't make but that you merged to the country in the poverty and the misery supported by the Catholic Church. This type is a shame for the nation. This bastard worried but to fight for the high ones that have for yes they never represented a separation threat for Guatemala, being the whole contrary case that of Belize, since it was being invaded by the English. Guatemala have a president that was one of the best. The one to my approach was the General George Baco in the decade of the years 30, the one which in a very astute way him proposed to England to go to an international arbitration, but the following years the Englishmen declared that they didn't have outstanding obligation with Guatemala and they considered as frontier the one that they had defined. This was logical because knew that they had those of losing in the time. Then I proposed them the refund of the territory in exchange for £400,000 sterling, but that if this didn't accept it then the Englishmen they should buy that territory to the same price. Look. But this didn't include the south part that corresponds to the territory of the Zirabas, as well as the island of Zapotillo. The Imogulzis thieves didn't accept it. In 1946, in times of Arabella, the Congress emits the Agreement 224 script 46, which establishes the total cancellation and annulment of the Treaty Anglo-Guatemalteco 1859, for what England never had. Neither he has been able to prove to main right, because what exists is single possession. In 1981 England gives the independence to Belize in a unilateral and abusive way, ignoring the right that Guatemala exercised on the territory that they occupied. In 1992 the government of the Serrano is having as accomplice lords. Unwisely and violating the constitution grants a recognition of independence to Belize that legally is worth the same thing that one shitted of Rigoberta Mensch. Guatemala claims the territory from the River Salston to the River Sitten, that is to say more than half of the territory Belizenio. Our bird Cal is guessed right, you should always point to an yes or yes, in a negotiation to try to achieve bigger benefits like a sovereign exit to the sea. Before this the Belizeos doesn't accept nothing. These what they propose is a narrow and tiny ocean fringe like exit to the sea. It is, but I believe that the fringe of the Queen's Isabel from England vagina is even but wide. To all the Belizeos I tell them, as the Guatemalans recognize them perfectly as country that they are, I didn't seize the demarcation of their territory, a jealous and their sovereignty where it really corresponds them. The south part of its territory should return to Guatemala. For not tiring this problem it is historical. How will it expose the case Guatemala before the International Court of The Hague? I ignore, the government should inform well. It is not a problem easy to approach. Thanks to our constitution it establishes that any outstanding decision to the conflict should be subject to a popular consultation. That is to say, the Guatemalans should vote to decide if we agree or not that the case leaves to an international court. Me in a personal thing, although I don't believe in the impartiality of this court, I will vote for the yes, because it is already time and finishing with this shit since they have a good time they enjoy bothering to the rural poor of Petun. It shows that it is not fair, neither it should be continued allowing. This case will demonstrate us if we can speak of right as means to achieve justice. In the next volume I will expose about what Guatemala should make to in the case.